Speak to me, Lord. Speak a word of life that I might hear.
Hey everyone, this is part 2 to the Hearing God's Voice series, and it's specifically about how to hear or know you're hearing God's voice versus Satan's voice. And there are lots of different reasons that you can know, when you hear something like, okay, is that God or is that Satan? So sometimes people just don't know, they're confused, and you kind of just be like, I don't know, and I'm struggling to hear from God, so how can I tell the difference? Well, this video is to help you out with that, and I'm going to give you a few examples and just references and different things that, have worked for me and that I just know for a fact is, plain outright, whether it's God or Satan. And trust me, I have had those moments where I'm like, oh, that's totally Satan. So it's not like I'm sitting here like, oh, I've always heard from God and, never had a problem with it. So yeah. Just another thing, excuse me if I'm like super hyper and talk really fast. I've just been like on 1000 since I got home. But yeah, so we're just going to jump straight into it. Okay, so first things first. In the first video, I was talking about how you can just distinguish when it's God's voice. And that is something where, first of all, I said you have to know Him. You have to build that personal relationship. You have to pray and really spend that time with God so you can know His voice. That way, when you know His voice, you'll know because you're familiar with Him. For instance, with kids, the more they hear their mother's voice or their father's voice or whoever, they begin to familiarize themselves with it. And that way, the second they hear their mom's voice, they just know, oh, that's my mama. I don't even have to take a second guess about it. So that's what I talked about. And also just about how we're like sheep, and sheep know their shepherd's voice. And we have to kind of look at ourselves that way, because in reality, that's what we are. And we need God to lead us. So we have to be willing to follow and be willing to be led. If we're not willing to be led and to literally sit there and seek God with our entire hearts and not try to hold anything back, but to really genuinely want to hear His voice and His instruction, that's when He'll speak to us. And then I said, we can't tell God when He should speak to us. So if you're having, quiet time or whatever every day at a certain time and you're like, okay, God, speak to me, He's not guaranteed to speak to you in that specific time. It's based on when He thinks that you need to hear something from Him. So moving on, now that we kind of figure out, okay, what does God's voice sound like? How do we know it's God? Now you got that. So here's Satan, and you're like, okay, it's like the little things on your shoulder. You got the angel over here, and then you got the little devil, and you're like, okay, which one should I listen to? They both sound pretty good. Guess what? In my head, it kind of works like that, but at the same time, when you are wholeheartedly just committed to God, yes, you'll have those two voices in your head, but you'll automatically just be drawn to the voice of God because you're spending so much time with Him. You're so familiar with His voice that you'll be able to be like, that's totally Satan. I'm not even going in that direction. So getting to that place is amazing. And I will say, it's not something that just happens overnight. You have to really put in the work and the effort and have the desire to get to that point. So one thing I can say is that honestly, when you hear God's voice, it's not something that's just going to magically make your life super easy and amazing. Because sometimes God is going to ask you to do something that may be completely uncomfortable. And there is a price to pay when you hear God's voice. Sometimes He may tell you to do something and you're like, seriously? Are you sure? I don't know about that. For instance, in Isaiah 20, He had told Isaiah, strip down and go walk around. And He's like, really? That's what you want me to do? Well, how long? How long do you want me to do that? And He's like, just do it. So Isaiah ends up walking around butt naked for 3 years. 3 years straight. And then God is like, okay, you can put your clothes back on. And then it's like the whole time, what is the point of this? But through His listening, then God is like, just as I exposed you and just as you were stripped naked, that is the exact same thing I'm going to do to Egypt. I'm going to do that to them. And it had nothing to even do with Jerusalem or the Israelites or anything. It had something to do with a completely different country. So, like, it can be really crazy like that. And we really have to get to a place to where we're willing, whatever we hear from God, we're willing to obey that and to just understand that voice. Another thing I can say about hearing God's voice versus Satan's voice is one thing you'll know is when you hear God, you will feel a complete peace about it. You won't feel confused or anything. Now, when it's Satan, there will be some confusion. You won't be sure. There'll be uncertainty and you'll kind of doubt what you're hearing. That's when you know it's Satan because God is not a God of confusion. So if he wants you to know something, he will tell you, especially if you've been spending time with him and you've really been seeking him about something. He'll tell you flat out, this is what I want you to do, or this is what it is, or this is what you need to know. And you'll know because he'll be like, yeah, that was God. I have peace about that. And it definitely relates to my current situation. And then another thing, when you're hearing God versus Satan, God will give you something or speak to you in a way that will help guide you closer to him. And you'll hear that when you are really seeking him, and it's something that'll pull you closer to him, something that'll glorify him. And when you're seeking yourself, when it's all about you, then in most cases it's Satan because, God, it sounds weird to say this, but he's not quite concerned with just us. It's not all about us. It's not all about our own lives. He has us here to serve a bigger purpose, and that is to be a light on this earth and to bring other people to him. And Satan is all about you. He wants you to be all about you and not to care about anybody else. If it was up to him, like, he just wants you to be selfish, and being selfish is not a godly trait. So if it's a selfish thing and you're like, okay, this is really just all about me and I just don't see any sort of godliness in it, then it's not God, it's Satan. And you have to get to that point to where you can pinpoint those certain things and really take what you're hearing and really just look at it and break it apart and say, okay, yeah, this is God. This is Satan. And sometimes if you have to write it out, do it. If you have to say, not saying do a pros and cons list because that's totally not this at all. But, writing down what you feel you're hearing from God and then what you're hearing from Satan. And you'll be able to see right on paper like, oh yeah, I totally see the difference. Even if it's something you just want to do just as an exercise, just to kind of practice like looking at it like, okay, these are the big differences between God's voice and Satan's voice. And the big thing that is definitely mentionable is that God speaks in different ways. It's not always that he will speak to you in your quiet time. God can speak through signs and wonders. He can speak through dreams. He can speak through visions. He can speak through other godly people. He can speak through preachers and prophets. He can even speak through children. There's so many different ways that he can speak through, and even creation. And those are things that he controls and that he orchestrates. So it's nobody but him because Satan has no power over creation. He has no power over like certain things. You just know that has to be God because Satan isn't even capable of that. So that's another big thing to really look at. So if you have certain dreams and you're like, this is really an answer to maybe something I was praying, or it's a warning about a situation that, was happening, then you know that it's God. Another big thing, I was reading something online and I thought this was absolutely amazing and so true. I know I spoke in the last video about how prophets will come and they'll speak a word to you, and not everybody that comes in the name of the Lord is coming in the name of the Lord. Let's be real about that. Some people are false prophets and they still do exist, even like they did back in the biblical time period. So it's really important to know that just because somebody comes up to you and says, God told me to tell you that you are going to dot 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 dot, or this is going to happen to you and all this other stuff, and it could be good or it could be bad. And you might be, some people are just really like, oh my gosh, really? And they'll take what somebody said to them to heart so quickly and just automatically assume, oh, it's God, they said God said it. That's not true all the time. And you have to be willing to test those things. You have to be, I always say, how do you know God told you that? And if they can't say anything, then it's like, I'm probably sure you don't even know yourself, so I shouldn't take what you're saying too seriously. But a lot of times you be able to sense in your spirit, the stronger you develop the Holy Spirit within you, that that this is out. You'll be able to sense when it's God and when it's not, when somebody's just talking from self. And another thing is that God, throughout the Bible, anytime He gave a warning, especially in the Old Testament, there's several times where He used a prophet and spoke through them and gave a warning to different nations about, you guys are being just disobedient, and if you don't get your act together or do XYZ, then this is going to happen. But if you repent and if you ask for forgiveness and you turn your lifestyle around, then you won't have to worry about that. Then this will happen. That's the type of God that we serve. God is not always like, boom, this is going to happen to you, and it's bad and that's it. If somebody comes to you and they're like, God told me to say that you're going to lose all of your money. Okay, that's encouraging. Not really, but that's not God. God doesn't want to tell you you're losing all your money. He might tell you you will lose all your money if you don't start tithing, or if you don't, create a budget or spend wisely. And that's giving you a solution to a problem before you reach destruction. God always gives warning before destruction. He's not just going to let you boom up and fall down this dark path all by yourself without warning you beforehand. So it's really important to pay attention to those details, because believe it or not, God is extremely detailed. Look at us as human beings. Look at the world around us. It's extremely detailed, and most of it we can't even fathom. So God is all about the details, and He will give you a clear-cut plan. He'll give you, like, His word will be just direct to you. He'll say, you need to do this, or I want you to do this, or He'll speak to you directly, and you won't even be confused about it. It won't be something that'll throw you off or anything like that. So those are just a quick, few things that I wanted to share with you, that I have learned myself, and also that I've heard from other, awesome men and women of God. So that's, pretty much it. I'm looking forward to part 3 of the series. I'll be uploading that in probably about a week or two. But yeah, I really hope that this has helped. If you have any questions or anything like that, or maybe if you would like further explanation, feel free to email me at collegegirlsafterchrist@gmail.com. And if you haven't subscribed to our monthly newsletter, do so as soon as possible, because that's going to be coming out on Monday and you don't want to miss it. If you are a college girl after Christ, or just a girl that's in college, or young woman, young lady, feel free to subscribe, and it's filled with awesome things. I'm really looking forward to everything that's happening. I hope you guys are having a wonderful week, and be blessed.